Good morning. I am Kim Mack, Special Assistant to the President for Governmental, Community, and College Affairs, and the MC for today's lecture. Women's History Month had its origins as a national celebration in 1981 when Congress passed Public Law 97-28, which authorized and requested the president to proclaim the week beginning March 7th, 1982 as Women's History Week. Throughout the next 5 years, Congress continued to pass joint resolutions designing or designating a week in March as Women's History Week. In 1987, after being petitioned by the National Women's History Project, Congress passed Public Law 100-9, which designated the month of March 1987 as Women's History Month. Between 1988 and 1994, Congress passed additional resolutions requesting and authorizing the president to proclaim March of each year as Women's History Month. Since 1995, presidents have issued a series of annual proclamations designating the month of March as Women's History Month. President Biden's proclamation was signed on February 28th of this year. In his proclamation, he shared that every March, Women's History Month provides an opportunity to honor the generations of trailblazing women and girls who have built our nation, shaped our progress, and strengthened our character as a people. North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper discussed the strength of the women in his proclamation. Here is his quote from his proclamation that was signed on March 1st. Despite facing tremendous challenges, North Carolina women are known for their strength and resilience, for their numerous contributions to our state throughout its history, and for their continued and ongoing contributions to the well-being of our state and its people. We will begin the program today with greetings from Michaela McNair, a senior with Northampton County Early College, followed by greetings from the Honorable Vernon Bryant, Chair of the Halifax County Board of Commissioners.
Good morning. On behalf of the student body, we welcome you to our 2022 Women's History Month lecture with Dr. Melinda Kane. Halifax Community College is a place where learning comes to life in pursuit of excellence and where education is focused on you. Students here can reach their goals by learning a trade, earning a certificate, diploma, associate's degree, or transferring to a 4-year college or university. Halifax Community College has been there for me and our community for 54 years. Thank you for attending today's ceremony.
Well, good morning. Of course, my name is Vernon Bryant, and I'm chair of the Halifax County Board of Commissioners. And on behalf of our commissioners, Vice Chairman Reeves Manning, Commissioners Carolyn Johnson, Patrick Quarles, Linda Brewer, and John Smith, and our county manager, Dia Denton, I do bring you greetings. And also I bring you greetings on behalf of our approximately 46,000 citizens in the county, as well as our 562 employees. I do bring you greetings on them as well. And on behalf of the commissioners, I want to say that Women's History Month is extremely important in that on International Women's Day, we named Dia Denton as our new permanent county manager in Halifax County. And that was a tremendous honor. But if you look around, you have very successful women doing a whole lot of things. You look at our vice president of the United States, that's a woman. You look at national figures as well as local figures, and women are leading in a lot of capacities. I look at the city of Roanoke Rapids, and they have a woman that's a town administrator for the city of Roanoke Rapids. And my wife is the first African-American female to sit on the city council in Roanoke Rapids. So with that being said, I'm gonna take my seat, but women are achieving in many ways, and women certainly are leaders. And I also thank the governor and thank all of everyone who has participated and who've honored women's history. God bless you, and may heaven smile upon you.
Thank you, Michaela, and thank you, Chairman Bryant. Next, we will have a video from the WASH channel discussing why we celebrate Women's History Month. After the brief video presentation, we will hear a musical selection from Ms. Katie Ammon, CEO and instructor of the Music School of Roanoke Rapids. She will be playing for us Unrest by Julie Lynn.
The WISE channel celebrates her story, women who did amazing things. You may be wondering why we celebrate women's history. Well, one reason is because most of the time, history is really his story. Over the years, much of history has been written by men, about men, and for men. In fact, about half the people in the world are women. But at the moment, less than 1% of written history is about women. That's a big difference. But it makes sense because in many subjects, we learn more about the accomplishments of men than women. In American history,
the Founding Fathers. These men built and created America.
The Founding Fathers are important, but what about the Founding Mothers who also helped create and build America? Inventors?
The Wright brothers. These men invented the first successful airplane.
Yes, but what about the great inventions made by women? Civil rights?
Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. These men led the civil rights movement.
But hundreds of women also led the way. This picture of America is his story, but his story is not the whole story. For every history-making man, there is at least one history-making woman. That's why it's important to also learn her story. In March of 1982, America celebrated the first Women's History Week, which later became Women's History Month, a time to celebrate the amazing things women have done and continue to do in America. Learning about and celebrating these women all year long helps us to see the whole story of history. It shows girls and boys that women are just as strong, smart, and brave as men. It also reminds us, once we add her story to his story, together we can learn our story. Let's talk. Why do you think we learn so little about women in history? Is it important to learn more? Why or why not? What can you do to learn more about women who did great things? Have you subscribed to the WISE channel? If not, do it today so you don't miss out on our new videos. Have a great day. Bye.
Make sure that you remember the questions at the end of the video and have a discussion with your peers and your family about women. Take the time to learn more about women who are doing great things. I bet each of us can think of a woman in your life that has been impactful and made a difference. Thank you to Mrs. Almond for sharing the beautiful musical selection. And I also want to just say it's great to also have women on the program today, such as Mrs. Ammon, because she is a business owner and she's also a woman. So it was perfect that she said yes for an occasion such as this, where we're celebrating women's history. Next, we will hear the introduction of our keynote speaker by Michaela McNair, followed by the keynote address from Dr. Melinda Kane, Associate Professor of Sociology and Co-Director of the Gender Studies Program at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina.
Good morning. Dr. Melinda D. Kane is an Associate Professor of Sociology and Co-Director of the Gender Studies Program at East Carolina University. As a social inequality scholar, Dr. Kane investigates the influence that gender and sexuality have on people's life experiences, economic rewards, and political influence. Her current research examines the intersection of inequality and activism through studies of the LGBTQ movement in the United States from the 1960s to the present. Since joining ECU in 2008, Dr. Kane has been a member of the Gender Studies Executive Board and supported programming at ECU's Women and Gender Office and the Dr. Jesse R. Peel LGBTQ Center. You can find her work in mobilization, social problems, social currents, and other academic journals. Dr. Kane has a bachelor's of arts in sociology from Villanova University and a doctor of philosophy in sociology from Vanderbilt University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Melinda Kane to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and to talk a little bit about women, work, and family. You want to go ahead and start the slideshow? So in sociology and gender studies, a key way that we evaluate kind of where women are and women's equality is through the examination of the workplace. How are women and men doing relative to one another in their experiences at work and in their workplace outcomes? And so today what I want to do is put that in the context of our current era as we are addressing issues of COVID and the impact that that has made. So one way that you've probably heard about kind of gender equity at work is by hearing about the pay gap, right? That's language that's often used. You'll hear about women making less on average than men. And in the news recently, you may have heard about the case of the national women's soccer team here in the United States, where the women on the soccer team, the national team, were being paid less than the men on the US soccer team, even though the women's team was doing much better internationally than the men. For example, in 2018, the men's team in the US didn't even qualify for the World Cup, but the women's team in 2019 won the World Cup. So there was debates about the degree to which that was equitable. And in fact, there was just a settlement last month providing back pay for the women on the US national team. So that's kind of equal pay in the news. See if I can remember which way to make it go. Another way that you might not think about equal pay is the idea of equal pay day. So equal pay day is a way to think about how much more women would need to work after the end of the year in order to make the same as men on average. So this year, equal pay day was March 15th. So that's just last week. And what that's symbolizing is at the end of 2021, women would have to continue to work until March 15th on average to make what men made in 2021. So it's a symbolic way of recognizing the extra days it would take for women to earn equivalent wages. And that's just women on average. Of course, women aren't just women. There's also differences by race, for example. And if you were to look at Black women or Latina women, or if you were to look at Indigenous women, that equal pay date would be even further into the calendar year. Now, there are lots of topics you could study about women in the workplace. And so, as I said, I decided to narrow it down by thinking about the way that COVID has influenced women's experiences in the workplace over the last 2 years, and a couple of the unique challenges that women have been facing. What's interesting is we know we entered an economic recession in March of 2020 as COVID entered our country in a substantial way. What I find interesting is the experts actually refer to it as a she-cession as opposed to a recession. And that's because women have been disproportionately affected economically. Oops. What we find is that women experienced much greater job loss that spring. Their unemployment rate was higher than men's as the job loss occurred. So we have massive job loss for everyone, but women's unemployment is higher than men's unemployment in this time. And this is different than other recessions, like the recession in 2008, or even the Great Depression, where men were disproportionately affected. Research has also found that when COVID struck, that women were much more likely to reduce their hours or to have fewer work hours than men at the same time, where men's hours, if they were working, did not really change. So it was increasing the gap in the hours worked. There's always a gap between the number of hours that women and men work, and that increased. So today, men's employment is essentially rebounded back to pre-COVID levels, but there are still fewer women working outside the home in the paid labor force now than there were before COVID. And this has implications for women's long-term financial well-being, right? Their ability to accrue retirement. Even the amount they accrue in Social Security is affected by their employment. It can affect their career mobility if they're taking time or have been removed from the labor market. They're having to maybe start back at a certain level and not move up. So that's a concern. And so the question then becomes, why women? Why have women been disproportionately affected? And one of the answers is occupational sex segregation. So let me explain what that term means, because it sounds kind of scary. All this means is that men and women tend to concentrate into different jobs, different occupations, different industries. In fact, it's kind of so common that if you think about jobs, you almost can classify them yourselves as a traditionally female job or traditionally male job, kind of a female job or male job. And so I have a couple sample occupations here, and I'm going to give everybody just a second to think about, are these male, which of these are male jobs and which of these are female jobs? As I drop my earring, sorry. And so most of us can be pretty comfortable figuring out, construction managers, is that a male job or a female job? So let's see how people do. This is from the US Census. And what it does is it has occupations, and the circles indicate the proportion of women in those fields. So the further to the right, if you're looking at it, the more women there are in that profession proportionally. The closer the circles are to the actual names of the occupation, then the fewer women, the lower the proportion of women there are in those occupations. So as you see, elementary, middle school teachers are very heavily female. which probably is not surprising to you, right? You know that. And in fact, if you just look at elementary school teachers, the proportion of women would be even higher, okay? Preschool teachers, even higher, right? This is something we know. And my guess is that most of you knew that construction managers are predominantly male, right? These are things that we know. Now, these also change. These dots show shifts over time. The dark dots are from 2019. The light dots are from 2000. So you can see there's also shifts. Veterinarians have become much more women, many more women in the veterinary field over time. So they're not stagnant, but there is this sex typing of occupations. So why is that relevant? Oh, before I talk about why it's relevant, I forgot. And sex segregation is a long-term historical factor. In fact, in the past, you used to be able to advertise specifically for men or women. So you could put a job ad as an employer and say, I'm looking for a man to do this job. I'm looking for a woman to do this job. And so these are actual job ads asking for women or men. And that wasn't illegal until the 60s. Okay. And there was a lot of pushback from employers. They wanted to be able to say whether they wanted to hire a man or a woman. So we have a long history of this sex typing of occupations. All right, so why is it relevant now? The job loss that happened in COVID was not consistent across industries. The industries that were hit were industries that were predominantly heavily done by women. So hospitality, right? Food service, retail, even certain childcare centers, for example, closed. So certain childcare, and even certain forms of healthcare. So hospitals needed staff, but people stopped going to their pediatrician, for example, or getting their mammograms. And so hours were very tight, or people were laid off in certain sectors of the health field. These are areas that predominate by women. So that effect of the recession affected women more because of the industries that they concentrated. Now, we've had some rebounding, but some of these areas rebounded quicker than others. I think people traveling for leisure took a long time to come back, right? Before people decided to go on vacations and get a hotel room and travel by air, right? So it took longer for some of these industries to rebound. So that's one key reason where the economy was affected women at higher rates. But why the continued effects? Why does there continue to be an effect for women? Because they still are out of the labor force at higher rates. And from there, we have to look outside of paid work and think about how families balance work and family, in particular, how women balance work and family. Because even before the pandemic, women have taken more responsibility for childcare and domestic labor in families. Of course, this is particularly true among single parent families because most single parent families are headed by women. So by definition, they're doing the paid work and all of the family care. But this is even true among couples where both people work full time. Some couples, of course, make a choice to divide the labor where one person works outside of the home and one works inside of the home. But even when two people in a couple are both working outside of the home, women still take more responsibility for that childcare and domestic labor. And this became amplified during COVID when childcare and schooling became more unstable. When schooling went online or virtual, when childcare was closed, right? And so this is one of the ways that researchers explain why women cut back on their hours. And they cut back on their hours because of these demands of home and work. What's interesting is this is not related to COVID, but it still, I think, highlights the way in which women, even before COVID, are having to balance work and family. In Judge Jackson's introductory remarks, as she's going through her confirmation to be our next Supreme Court justice, she talked specifically about her daughters and made references that she had about challenges of balancing her career and motherhood, right? So this is not unique to COVID, but COVID exacerbated it because of the instability of childcare and schooling, increasing the demands on family while people were still trying to work. And this is just another slide to show you this idea about who's doing what in the home. And again, this is pre-COVID, just to show you. And this is a poll of men asking, of partnered men, asking who's more likely to do this task, you or your female partner, your wife or your partner. And as you see, the everyday tasks like childcare, like making meals, like laundry, those are the things that are done predominantly by women, even based on what their male partners say. Where things like yard work and car maintenance were the things that men said that they were more likely to do. I always like to point out, though, that those are things you can kind of do on your own schedule. If I don't rake my leaves right today, I'm probably okay. Like I can't go forever before the neighborhood association comes after me, but I can go for a little while. But if I don't feed my kid today, like that's a problem, right? So the tasks that women do are the daily tasks where there's not a lot of wiggle room. Oops. And so how have women been dealing with this? Women are talking about feeling burnt out. In fact, they did a Gallup poll, or a recent poll researchers did, and they found that 42% of women say that they're always or almost always feeling burnt out. And that's because these disruptions haven't stopped, right? There's still less childcare available. Some of those childcare centers did not open back up. Centers are understaffed, right? We know lots of places are understaffed. And if your childcare center is understaffed, you can't have as many children in your care. You might have to shorten your hours because you can't get someone to cover that later 4 to 6 shift. We know that schools, classes, and centers can still close due to infection, whether your own child might be ill or be a close contact and need to quarantine. So there's still disruptions. There's still this need to balance. And that stress is potentially causing women to exit. So how do you balance work and family? Maybe you don't. Maybe you stop working. Maybe you go part-time. Maybe you roll back your hours, right? In ways that can impact women's long-term economic participation and outcomes. So what happened? What's going on? In general, what we have is we have COVID disruptions interacting with existing patterns in our home lives and in the workplace in ways that created conditions leading to that she session, where women's work lives have been disproportionately affected by COVID. And there's concerns that that will have long-term impacts on women's economic well-being. But not to only be negative. Sociologists often, we joke we're the doom and gloom, right? Pointing out all the ways, all the challenges that we have. But a sociologist at Stanford, Shelley Correll, she points out that we actually have an opportunity to make work a more equitable place, not just around gender, but around lots of ways, because we've seen that various work patterns are possible. Teleworking, working at home part-time and working in the office part-time. We found that these different ways of working have been effective, and we had to do them. And that you could continue to do them, giving people more control over when and where they work. And that would potentially help alleviate caregiving issues for everyone, whether it's women or someone else, whether it's childcare or elder care, whether it's just balancing life in general. As long as employers don't continue to value the face-to-face employees that are on site and who overwork, and as long as employers don't assume that these more flexible work arrangements mean that people are available 24/7, right? Which we know is always a risk. But embracing some of these new workplace patterns could potentially give people the opportunity to manage their lives and their work in ways that could actually be more equitable. And so I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, for your very informative presentation on women, work, and family, unique challenges under COVID-19. It was very informative, it was helpful, and we have some things to really think about. So thank you for that. When I reached out to Dr. Kane, it was a cold call. And I appreciate her saying yes without hesitation. She told me this morning this was her first visit ever to Halifax County, and we hope to have her come and visit with us again soon. So thank you. Next, we will have another musical selection by Mrs. Ammon. She will be playing for us Rise Up by Andrea Day. Following the musical selection, we will hear closing remarks from Dr. David Forrester, Acting President of HCC and Vice President of Administrative Services.
Good day. Thank you very much for participating in today's event in the celebration of Women's History Month here at Halifax Community College. This has certainly posed special significance to us and all the contributions that the women have made. We appreciate today and organization of today's event, Kimberly Mack, also the assistance of the HCC security team, House Music Productions for today's audiovisual, also the HCC marketing team. Also like to say thanks today in today's overall presentation of the topic and the overall program. Chairman Bryant from the Halifax County Board of Commissioners, thank you very much for your participation. Also, Katie Ammon from our musical selections that we've had today. Thank you, Ms. Ammon. From the keynote speaker introduction, Ms. McNair, thank you very much for your participation. And of course, our special guest today, thank you for coming and being part of the celebration today. And we're glad that you now know where Halifax County is and know how to come back here to HCC in the future. Thank you very much, Dr. Kane, for your topic. Very important and certainly very, very relevant in today's society, the impact of COVID and how women have had to step up in many ways to be leaders of their family and also of our community. Thank you very much for your participation in today's event. This concludes today's overall celebration of Women's History Month today with our special guest lecture from Melinda Kane, a Ph.D. from East Carolina University. Thank you so much.